Bruce Banner knew was darkness, and in his mind, he thought he was actually dead, which is kind of cool because it gives us a little bit of insight into how people perceive the concept of death, just total blackness or maybe just a paradise or something along those lines. But this is when Bruce Banner began to realize that he and the Hulk had basically combined back into one again when he woke up next to Betty Ross in her Red Hulk form. Now, following this, Bruce began to set his plans into motion. This is actually kind of a cool moment here. What Bruce needed was cash. He needed money. He needed the ability to buy the kind of services that were necessary in order to begin setting his plan in motion. And so what he had done is basically just gone to a casino and just played roulette. I mean, that's kind of weird. He just plays roulette and then just wins a ton of cash, and then turns around and uses that to begin the process of kind of building up his empire. Now, the funny thing about this is that he uses the name Joe Fixit. And a buddy of mine, Raymond, that I haven't talked to Raymond for a long time, but a buddy of mine, Raymond, hit me up on Facebook and asked me about Joe Fixit. He's like, what can you tell me about the character of Joe Fixit? So here's the deal. When the Incredible Hulk was first introduced in Marvel Comics, he was gray. I mean, that's no secret at this point, but he was gray. The issue is that it only lasted for about 6 issues because of the fact that they couldn't keep the gray scheme going. It was just too difficult with printing presses as they existed at the time, and so because of that, they made him green. Now, Gray Hulk was brought back, but the green version of the Incredible Hulk was intrinsic to his character. It's the Incredible Hulk everybody thought of, and so they couldn't just suddenly make him gray with no real explanation as to what was going on. And so what they did is they took the gray concept and made it a wholly different version of the Hulk, and somebody just called him Joe Fixit. And so Joe Fixit was just this version of the Hulk that lived in Las Vegas and was really more of a mobster than anything else, kind of like a hired hand bouncer sort of situation. But again, we covered a lot of that stuff when we did Greg Pak's run from Planet Hulk going up until we started this run. But what this does is it basically kind of fast forwards by about a week, in the sense that once he began the process of getting all this money together, once he got his resources together, then it basically picked up with the Incredible Hulk as we saw here, with him just kind of waking up in different places and so on and so forth. And so a really cool moment comes when, following the events of the Hulk versus, the Thing and Wolverine, and the Hulk turns back into Bruce Banner again. There's a really cool moment in the sense where Banner had basically, contacted a doctor who's kind of worked for hire. A lot of discretion is maintained where the identities of the people aren't really taken into account. But Banner was picked up by these guys and was basically worked on, restored to health, that kind of thing. But when the doctor goes to leave, it's almost this existential crisis, right? Like, Banner doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know what he's about. Not in the sense that he lost his memory. I mean, he has his memory and everything. It's just he doesn't know where he's going in the world. What's this all leading to? Who am I really on a fundamental level? And it's really kind of cool because the whole aspect of the Hulk personality kind of throws that into fray. And that's been the whole basis behind his character, right? Like, the whole explanation of him losing his mind, going insane, based on the fact that he and the Incredible Hulk had been split, was designed to ask the question, who is Banner without the Hulk? What is he really? Is the Hulk a crutch more so than an actual aspect of his personality? The Incredible Hulk is the mean by which Banner can just kind of let loose, just kind of cut loose and let things unfold? Or is he really just kind of a prisoner in his own mind? He just can't escape the Incredible Hulk, and every once in a while he's just kind of held captive when the Hulk proper. Now, of course, at this point, we pick up with Banner kind of tracking down Dr. Doom and basically asking the question that's really at the root of all this: why did Dr. Doom help Banner in the first place? But this is kind of funny because when I initially went over the beginning of the story, we really didn't focus on Dr. Doom too much in terms of chronology because I wanted to wait until this moment to flesh that out. But that moment with Dr. Doom, when he had basically worked on the Incredible Hulk, when he had split Hulk and Banner into 2 different people, this took place during the fallout of Hickman's Fantastic Four, the Future Foundation and all that stuff. The way the Future Foundation story ended, Dr. Doom was basically among the remnants of the Council of Reeds, with all those versions of himself that had been taken prisoner by the Council of Reeds and had been lobotomized. So that's one of the reasons why in that story he was like, Doom, and he looks at us as the viewer, he looks at us as the reader and says, I can build here, because it was basically him being away from the main Marvel universe. That's why there's all these Doombots here, because these Doombots are kind of just waiting on Dr. Doom to come back, but they also begin to build a little bit of sentience, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But the idea is that, again, this all basically circles back to the ending of the last video when Hulk wakes up to this broadcast from Bruce Banner. And this is crazy because Bruce Banner looks at the Hulk and says, look, man, we've been fighting forever. Like, ever since we've been in existence, ever since you first manifested, we've been fighting each other. You've been fighting for dominance. I've been fighting for dominance. We end up having to share the same body for once, even if it's only just to go after Dr. Doom and to get the answer to the question of why he helped us and what his ulterior motive is. For once, let's just work together. Like, let's just come together and let's just defeat Dr. Doom. Doom. Let's just beat him this one time. And that's what they do. What we get here is this kind of perfect version of Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk working in unison. Now, this is not the first time this has happened. It's happened before. There's been stories where the Incredible Hulk had the intelligence of Bruce Banner, where Bruce Banner kind of allowed that aspect of his body to be used by the Incredible Hulk. There's been times where Bruce Banner has had the strength of the Incredible Hulk. We saw that in Old Man Logan, but we've almost never seen an instance where the two of them have worked in perfect unison before, where their motives were so perfectly lined up that they basically became a singular cohesive being. And so this is almost an indication of what Bruce Banner should have been. When he was first blasted by the Gamma Bomb, this is almost an indication of what he should have turned out as, how he should have appeared. Now, of course, this coincides with the arrival of, I guess the return of Amanda Von Doom and the Mad Squad and so on and so forth. Again, the whole reason for that is because of the fact that they were originally assigned to track down Bruce Banner, because of the fact that Banner had basically re-emerged, or I guess merged back again with the Incredible Hulk, and Banner's been sighted in different places around the world. It kind of brought them back together again, just because of the fact that, from the perspective of Amanda Von Doom, Hulk lied about killing Banner in the first place and so on and so forth. But picking up with these Doom bots, what we end up finding out is that, again, because of the fact that it was the original Dr. Doom who split Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk, who has since, taken off as part of the Future Foundation, and it's simply these Doom bots left to carry out his work. The Doom bots were always kind of this interesting situation in the Fantastic Four mythos. The Doom bots were this idea that was sort of toyed around with, and different writers depicted them different ways. On the whole, the idea of a Doom bot is that the person's designed to function and be the same as Dr. Doom in almost every form or fashion. But this was really kind of like focused on more so by Ed Brubaker during the story The Books of Doom than it ever was in any other story. It's probably the greatest story fleshing out the nature of Doombots, in the sense that the story is designed to give us like this full origin of Dr. Doom, but it's not until the end of the story that we find out that it's being told by a Doombot. Now, of course, again, this was designed to just kind of, show us how far the Doombots go, what their programming is, how they're designed to be autonomous. Ideally, the Doombots are there so that they can just carry out the whims and wants of Dr. Doom, and he never really has to do anything. But that's also the kind of funny situation here, is because when Dr. Doom appears to people, you never know if it's really him or if it's a Doombot. That's the purpose of the Doombots. They're like life model decoys for Dr. Doom, but they're specific to him. Now, of course, because of the fact that Dr. Doom himself is actually off-world as part of the Future Foundation, the Doombots are carrying out his program. They're carrying out his goal, his overarching plan. And this is when we learn what his plan is. His plan is to basically follow up with what Bruce Banner did. The Bruce Banner, after being separated from the Incredible Hulk, Banner began the process of just creating these gamma-irradiated animals, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, I'm sorry, I had to. But he started creating these irradiated animals on this island. Doom took that concept and continued it on. Now, again, this also coincides with the idea of the Mad Squad kind of coming together and then working alongside the Incredible Hulk, but it's also the idea that they captured one of their own Doombots. And so at this point, they're just kind of breaking it down and trying to figure out everything that it knows and learning to understand what it is that it's about. And so what this does is it also reveals to us that the Doombots still consider Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk to be a legitimate threat. And so because of the fact that anybody who speaks to a Doombot doesn't really know that it's not Dr. Doom, they use this to their advantage in the sense that they actually approach a company called Brain Damage Incorporated. And this company basically exists for the purpose of just kind of going through, infiltrating people's minds and then wreaking all kinds of havoc. Now, again, they are one of a multitude of groups that serve this purpose. And that's why I like little inclusions about this, in this comic and in other comics that we see throughout Marvel Comics, is because even if they only appear once, we end up seeing this sort of bolstering in terms of these different landscapes and the different, groups that play roles and so on and so forth. For example, back in the 1970s, 1967, I think it was. I think it was X-Men number 28. There was a group that was introduced called Factor 3. They were just a group of people that were led by a guy named Mutant Master, and he just wanted to take over the world. But it's these different organizations and different groups that exist throughout Marvel Comics that serve all different manner of purposes, some of which have their own motivations in mind. For example, Damage Control Incorporated. Damage Control Incorporated was the legitimate company that just went through and cleaned up cities after superhero conflicts. It wasn't until during the events of Civil War that we learned that they were basically instigating conflicts for the purpose of maintaining their own government contracts. So again, it was really kind of a cool idea and a cool situation with all these different groups and so on. But of course, this leads to the Mad Squad basically invading Latveria, or invading the base of these Doombots and facing off against them. But the other half of this is we actually get a little bit of a look on the inside of Bruce Banner's mind. Now, in truth, this is the mindscape. There is no physical physical structure when it comes to the interior of Bruce Banner's mind. But, you know, in this instance, it's really just Jason Aaron and company giving us the best look that we can get in the context, but also adding a little bit of humor to it in the sense that they've actually got like physical controls. The Hulk hits a smash button whenever he wants to start tearing stuff up. It's these funny little moments, you know, that make these stories so cool and make them so interesting. But the other half of this is that we end up finding out that Brain Damage Incorporated had basically unleashed a guy called the Vegetable. And the reason why they call him that is because he's a really powerful telepath who's stuck in a vegetative state, but he's able to basically enter the minds of other people and then in turn begin attacking them. Now, this kind of stretches the limits of credulity to a little bit. It actually kind of asks us a few different questions, because one of the most notable aspects of the Incredible Hulk is that he has been overcome by different telepaths, but he's also got some kind of telepathic shielding. And it's really one of these ideas where it's just whatever the writer calls for at any particular point in time. When the Hulk's at his absolute strongest, it's almost impossible for a telepath to take him out. When the Hulk's in a really calm state or when he's taken by surprise, a telepath can enter his mind. And so again, it's really one of these situations where it depends on what level he's at, you know, what mindset he's in at that particular point in time, whether he's expecting telepathic attack or not. It's just different ways to kind of deal with it. I mean, with this story, it's really the idea of Jason Aaron kind of going back to the roots of the Incredible Hulk and saying, if there is a telepath out there strong enough, they will be able to enter the mind of the Incredible Hulk and they will be able to take him down. Again, this isn't the first time we've seen that. That was the whole big deal with Jean Grey, you know, during the Onslaught saga. She entered the mind of the Incredible Hulk. She suppressed the Bruce Banner personality. Bruce Banner attacked Onslaught, and he was the only person that was able to punch a hole in the armor of Onslaught, allowing, you know, the heroes to jump in and then kick off the whole Heroes Reborn landscape. But the fact remains here, Bruce Banner facing off against the Vegetable, this is actually a really cool moment, because with the Vegetable's kind of, you know, just unleashing this psychic attack on Bruce Banner's response is, I fought everything, and I've seen and done everything. I fought men, I fought gods, I fought mutants, I've seen and done it all. But the most terrifying thing that I could ever endure is my own mind. And the cool thing about this is that like arms actually reach out and grab this Vegetable, and of course Bruce Banner begins fighting back against the Vegetable, you know, with the help of these arms. But what this does is it hits home at the idea that these are all basically just arms that belong to different versions of the Hulk or even other personalities that Bruce Banner has. You know, for example, Joe Fixit, you know, his arms are available in there. There's Savage Hulk, presumably, or maybe some other iteration of the Incredible Hulk, just these different arms that physically manifest themselves in different ways. And they really just kind of represent all the psychotic states of Bruce Banner's mind, presumably all the personalities that he has stuck in his head. Now, this does not mean that Bruce Banner's like Legion, you know, and even then, this could just be the physical manifestation of his internal mind, in the sense that he's using his mind to work against the Vegetable. It could be any number of things that we can interpret in any number of different ways. But at the end of the day, it's really Bruce Banner just kind of fighting back against the Vegetable, using his own abilities, and then just overcoming the Vegetable accordingly. But again, because of the fact that Bruce Banner kind of takes back over control of the situation, allows the Incredible Hulk to face off against the Vegetable in his own mind. Again, you know, another example of these two guys working in tandem, working together. And it shows us that, yeah, this may not be the most powerful version of the Hulk. This is not the strongest version of the Hulk there's ever been. But in a lot of ways, they're actually better. Worldbreaker Hulk was really one of the strongest versions of the Hulk. But with regards to the two of them working together, it's the intelligence of Bruce Banner with the formidable strength of the Incredible Hulk that's limitless, working in tandem. And that allows them to overcome virtually any situation. In this instance, alongside Mad Squad, they're able to subdue both the Vegetable inside the mind of Bruce Banner at the hands of the Hulk, as well as the Doombots by Bruce Banner himself. So again, you know, because of the fact that Banner had developed this cure and chose not to use it on the Incredible Hulk, he in turn uses it on all the different monsters that have been treated, you know, been basically manipulated, or at least the monsters and people who have been manipulated by Dr. Doom and Banner himself, returning them back to their normal state. So again, it wraps back around to the beginning of the story. It starts to tie up all these different loose ends. And again, you know, like some monkey throws poop in Banner's face, or, you know, and he turns into the Incredible Hulk and presumably goes after the monkey, kind of ending on a little bit of a comedic note. But this is, again, just kind of a self-contained story. And that was really the idea with the Incredible Hulk coming after Greg Pak's run. Because Greg Pak's run was so extensive, because it predates Planet Hulk, running through Planet Hulk, going of the Hulks, World War Hulks, because of the fact it ran through all those different things, it was this massively expansive run of its character. It was so incredibly huge. And so the idea was not to repeat that. The idea was to just hand the Incredible Hulk over to some writers and see what they could do, see what kind of stories they could craft, you know, what kind of stories they could tell. And so it was really just kind of like a series of small self-contained adventures that didn't really last anything more than, you know, 20 issues a piece or something like that. So anyway, if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace. just say, bring Comics Explained onto the podcast. Joe Rogan, I want to be on the Joe Rogan podcast. It's like the coolest podcast ever. And like, I think it'd be so awesome to be on there. Dude, I'll teach you everything about comics, man. I'll teach you everything you want to know about comic books. Go over there and just spam his Twitter account, guys. Just spam the hell out of the thing. And then we'll see what happens. Either I make an enemy out of Joe Rogan, which I really hope I don't do, or he's just like, this man with a magical voice, I must bring him onto my podcast because he sounds awesome. And I am. Okay, so picking up with another episode of Too Powerful for Marvel movies, and this one, I want to talk about Sabretooth. And I know this goes against the conventional wisdom of the series, like the basis idea of the series, that like there are beings who are just too powerful for Marvel movies. Like their power is just on too grand of a scale to throw into Marvel movies. But Sabretooth, I feel like is a character they couldn't do in Marvel movies. And here's the reason why. Sabretooth, well, there's two kinds of Sabretooth, right? Like you have classic Sabretooth and you have new Sabretooth. New Sabretooth, as he exists now in Marvel Comics, he's a lot more toned down. I mean, there's been a lot of character development, like focusing on Sabretooth as a person, like he became a good guy for a little while, things like that. You go back to Sabretooth in the 1980s with Chris Claremont? No, the guy was just he was just a mindless killing machine. I mean, just mindless. In every sense, like all he wanted to do was just kill and cause death and destruction. That's all he wanted to do. And he was very, very, very good at it. The way that character was done, it was a whole different world. That's the thing to keep in mind, guys. Like, it's one of the things that I've noticed. I was sitting here thinking about this the other day. It's one of the things that I've noticed, having read Marvel Comics for so long. One of the things we've noticed is that comic books have gotten a lot more like G-rated, so to speak. I mean, not truly G-rated, but like they've become less dark and less like violent over the years. Take, for example, like the X-Men after House of M. The X-Men after the events of House of M, it was basically rebuilding the X-Men landscape. And while you had darker stories like X-Necrotia, like even then, they were still not that violent. Like they were just kind of like, okay, so like some things happen and some characters get developed. No. Like the darkest you really get during that point in time, I would say the darkest you get after House of M is when William Stryker comes back and then blows up a busload of mutant kids. That's about as dark as it gets. But like, that's Chris Claremont, man. Chris Claremont did that all the time. God Loves, Man Kills, one of the greatest X-Men stories of all time that introduces William Stryker and the Purifiers. People who believe that God wants them to kill mutants. The story opens with the Purifiers killing kids. They're begging for their lives. They're like, no, please don't, like we don't know what we did wrong. And they were like you were born. That's what you did wrong. And then they just like kill him. And then Magneto shows up and he's like, I'm so tired of this. Dude, man, we really need to cover God Loves, Man Kills. But like you saw that stuff all the time. Now here's the thing. Here's why this worked. So you look at Sabretooth back during the 1980s. Really, 1980s is like the most violent era of his career. So you look back at Sabretooth during the 1980s and you say, okay, here's a guy they were trying to flesh out. Like they were trying to like figure out how dark they could get away with him being. You look at some of like the classic fights between Sabretooth and Wolverine, they were the stuff of legend. These are some of the greatest fights ever in the history of comic books. They were just ferocious. I mean, they were just cleaving flesh off of each other. I mean, it was just hardcore. And it was something you were always excited to see, right? Like Wolverine's like, I'm gonna take a break from being on the X-Men because, whatever. And like, I'm gonna go explore some stuff or go travel around the world or whatever. And then he's just kind of sniffing around and he's like, Sabretooth is here. And it's like, yep. And you guys are fighting out in the middle of nowhere, which means you guys can just have a knockdown, drag out fight. I mean, it was things like that. Like take, for example, the Mutant Massacre. All right. So Marvel had a story called Mutant Massacre, and it was the first big crossover event among all the X-Men titles. And then Thor was thrown in there for good measure. And the idea was that you had a villain named Mr. Sinister who had or at least Gambit had previously contacted Sinister and said, hey, look, I need you to basically reduce my powers because I can't control them and they're just too powerful. So Sinister does that and says, I will call on you for a favor later on. Now fast forward and Chris Claremont introduces the Morlocks. And the Morlocks were these mutants that existed underground in the sewers of New York that were basically like physically deformed. They lived down there because the physical appearance of them would make them, cast-outs on the surface world. And so they took up refuge in New York. Sinister got wind of them, and then he believed they were experiments. They were basically things that he had created and had gone awry. And so he basically he grabs Gambit and says, your job is to grab Sabretooth and grab a whole bunch of these guys and go to the Morlock tunnels. Now, Gambit wasn't really told what was going to happen, and he didn't know what was going to happen until he got there. And then once like all the marauders, the henchmen of Sinister started killing all the Morlocks, Gambit bailed. He's like, I'm not having anything to do with it. And he took off. I think he saved like some Morlock girl and then just ran. Like, because he's like, this is way too much. Eventually the X-Men found out and they thought that he was a part of it, so they kicked him off the team, which created like this huge schism between himself and Rogue. But no, like the other Marauders were there and they're like, we're doing this for a job. Sabretooth was doing it for the pleasure. He was just doing it because he could. He's like, I just want to kill people. You don't even have to pay me. Like, I'll just do it for the fun of doing it. Sabretooth back then, you throw him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You take Sabretooth out of the 80s in the comics and you throw him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and you say like, in order to get to Wolverine Sabretooth, you have to kill all the Avengers. He'll tear them apart. I mean, he'll rip them to pieces. I Iron Man would stand a pretty good chance because it's Iron Man and he's got, you know, his repulsor beam and stuff like that. But even you know, Sabretooth or Adamantium, he'd still tear through Iron Man. Now, how long it would take him to get to Iron Man would be kind of a tough thing, because Iron Man can fly around, he can dodge, he can bob and weave, and so on and so forth. But Spider-Man, he would fall. Captain America, like he'd be handled with the greatest of ease. It would be an absolute bloodbath. I mean, he would just tear through them all because he would just like go into this animalistic state. It'd be one of those things where it's like why are they even fighting him, because they don't stand a chance. And that's kind of the funny thing, is because Sabretooth was also a part of Team X, I'm pretty sure. So he was part of that Black Ops wet work team with Wolverine and with Logan before they were taken by Weapons Plus and thrown into the Weapon X program. So he does know how to operate with like stealth and guile and stuff like that. In the old 80s comics, he usually wouldn't. He would just go in, like, I mean, he would just go in, guns blazing, rip everything apart, and and they would be like, yep, it's Sabretooth, man, killing everything he finds. It creates a crazy situation, because when you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the characters as a whole are a lot more toned down, a lot more ordered, structured, and regimented, and grounded in the real world. Doctor Strange uses that. I mean, Doctor Strange would be fine because he uses magic, but like, Doctor Strange uses magic. You know, Tony Stark has his, you know, repulsors, and he's got his Iron Man suit and so on. You know, Black Panther has technology and vibranium. Spider-Man, of course, is Spider-Man. Captain America can run really fast and punch hard and throw a shield. You know, and then you got like Black Widow, and you got Hawkeye, and so on and so forth. But again, like, they're basically kind of the answer to the question, what if somebody was just like a little more exceptional than the average person, right? Like, Hawkeye's just really, really accurate. Black Widow's just like a really, really good assassin. And like, Captain America basically is like a guy on steroids. And like, Iron Man's super smart, and Black Panther has vibranium. But like, in and of themselves, there's nothing special about them. The only person is the Incredible Hulk. I mean, all it would take is Banner turning into the Hulk, and then just be the end of Sabretooth. But say that like we removed Banner from the equation. We said, okay, Banner's not here.